one of the most entertaining things about the Dokkan community is the arguing that goes on, as well as the controversial points that people like to make over on websites like Twitter. Without this would be a very kind of dry community, and it would also kind of make things very difficult. If everyone was in agreement on everything, it would be a very boring place. So what we decided to do was went on Twitter and asked what are the most argued points that you guys think is kind of like the most talked about points, right? And what better way to do this than to have Goresh on to talk about some of these opinions and kind of get his thoughts on that, right? Because usually you don't get someone like Goresh throwing his hat in the ring on terms of the little things on Dokkan Battle, right? So what we did when we recorded episode 100 of the Dokkan Battle podcast, we made a segment to present him some tweets and some thoughts that users on Twitter put. We will put credit to the tweets on the screen as you see them. And then we asked Goresh, as well as Masked Ningen, and as well as Minato's Flash, to see how they thought of some of these opinions. So if you guys want to see this as it happens or in the moment, we have it on the Dokkan Battle podcast. We run this usually weekly to bi-weekly, covering everything that the game has to offer. It's a very busy season right now with Gamma 1 and 2's information right on the cusp. It might already be out by the time you're seeing this video. But without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into the clip from the podcast where Goresh gave his thoughts on some of the most argued points within the Dokkan community.
I remember listening to those old ones, and like halfway through, you'd like tag out, be like, "All right, you ready for Legends yet? All right, now I'm coming on," and because like people would talk about Legends and some would talk about Dokkan, and yeah, it was
of course
crazy.
I did both, so I was.
You did both, of course, yeah. So you had to clear the day, yeah. Very, very cool. Anybody else have anything else they want to say about the podcast before we move on? All right, so we're going to the big finale. This is what you are waiting for. We've got some argued points in the community, and this comes from a Minato tweet. And the guests do not know. I know what's going to be asked, but they do not know what is going to be asked. So we're going to get their natural reaction. And I think on each question, we'll go Goresh and then Ningen and then Minato on this. So Goresh, just your natural reaction to this. Dragon Ball Saga is not worthy of being an anniversary theme. How do you respond to that, Goresh?
All right, so here's my take on this. So the thing with Dragon Ball Saga is I would say that most people who are, decent fans of the OG Dragon Ball are probably older, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think if you take a look at like the average age of the people who play Dokkan, right? Because it's not necessarily, Dragon Ball Saga is popular, therefore it would be popular in Dokkan, because it's not the same demographic.
Right.
I think the average age of people who play Dokkan is probably a lot younger than the average age of people who, have watched Dragon Ball in general.
Right.
So I could see the argument for that, just because a decent chunk, if not like maybe even as high as like 50% of people who are playing Dokkan have never seen Dragon Ball. So that I think could potentially be, a reason why they wouldn't push Dragon Ball Saga for a big ticket celebration like Worldwide or the anniversary. But I think if you are somebody who has actually seen Dragon Ball and you've seen all of it, and you're not somebody who's just focused on like the, I don't know, Dragon Ball Super colors, lights, and wizard beams only, then you probably would understand that it's a good series. So that's what I'll say about that.
All right, Ningen, what do you feel about that comment?
Well, I'm going to put it up on my screen right now. There you go. There's this. You'll have seen this image for sure on Twitter, but there's the tree meme. People who say OG Dragon Ball is not worthy get treed. But yeah, like, I'm personally not someone that gets super hyped about OG Dragon Ball Saga. But I think it's crazy to say that it's not worthy of being the anniversary. Like, people can make arguments that they don't think it should be because of various different reasons to do with, like, even stuff like Goresh was saying, right, about certain marketability, especially like for global. But like, to say that it's not worthy of being the anniversary when it is literally like, that's where Dragon Ball comes from. Like, even if you are not personally a huge fan of it, we wouldn't have all the stuff that we have now if we didn't have OG Dragon Ball. So to say that it's not worthy of being an anniversary, I think is crazy. Because that if it was picked to be the theme for the anniversary, they would step it up. Like, the units would be crazy, the animations would be crazy. Like, if they chose to do it, I would see it being a very good celebration. So to say it's not worthy of being it, I think is crazy.
Yeah, like, is anybody complaining about this busted Android 8 that they just released? No, I don't think anybody's complaining about that. Like, they just make them busted and it will be good, right? Minato, what do you think about the Dragon Ball Saga anniversary topic?
I do agree with Ningen's sentiment where, if, or you as well, right? If they make the unit really, really good, people are going to want to summon it regardless. Like, I'll tell you, if you said like in July, like the Cooler movie was going to be the
Yep.
best stops for worldwide or something, people would like have clown on you and be like, no, it should be, it can't be Cooler. That sucks. It should be Vegeta or something, right?
Yep.
And then you see how well they did the Cooler celebration, right? And I'm sure, Cooler's not necessarily like, your blue Vegeta or something, Well, they say the thing is that it's still technically Goku too, right? Like even
Yep.
though it's Kid Goku, it's still Goku in that sense. So people will know the character, and I believe we had like those survey results that the global version showed, and a good what around 50% or more of the player base actually summons based off of the unit and how many teams or how good they impact in difficult contents. So because of that, I feel like as long as the unit's like obscenely good, then with the really good animations, which is like the second part, how good the animations are, I think the unit would be able to do well, especially considering, if it's like Goku and Demon King Piccolo, right? That's a very, very high point in Dragon Ball, and it's considered a battle of fate moment. And I would say basically most, if not all, like fights from the battle of fate moment do deserve to be like a Dokkan Fest or could be like leading an anniversary, even if it's
Yeah.
like the main unit. It could be part of the anniversary, right? We even had units like technically like 17 and Golden Frieza were an anniversary unit, for example, right? And that was a cool moment in my opinion, but I know a lot of people weren't like, like, oh my god, I can't wait to summon, right? My personal opinion on that though, I think that it would do well for sure if they do it right, of course.
Mhm.
And to that point, I mean, if 17 and Golden Frieza were actually good, then yes, people
Yeah,
would maybe be
exactly.
more likely. The part of the reason
Exactly,
is that they
right?
were not as hype and also just a bad unit. Like, so yeah. But
I mean,
Easy A could be a thing, so we'll see.
I know me and I know Goresh as well as like pretty big fans for the Ginyu Force. I
Yeah.
assure you, if Ginyu was not like nearly as good as he was, people wouldn't care right?
Oh
As much
yeah,
as they
Right.
do.
100%.
If Ginyu was Raditz, then nobody would have cared, right? Which
Yep.
is why
Exactly.
nobody cares
Or
about Raditz, because
if
Raditz is Raditz.
Raditz was like stupid good, right? You
Yeah.
could see the point.
Yep.
I would have been hyped for Raditz because I think he's a cool character and I want him to have a good card in the game, but he's so bad I couldn't warrant summoning for him. So, I mean, that's the thing. All right, well, let's go to our next question. So, Goresh, you ready for another hot take here?
Let's go.
All right. Items should be considered when evaluating units.
I don't see anything wrong with that statement. I mean, I think there's two different scenarios, I guess, you can evaluate units on. So, either with or without items. And I think there's nothing really wrong with evaluating a unit from both standpoints. So I don't really have an issue with that. I don't know. Items are part of the game unless they ever come out with a stage that just simply doesn't let you use items or support memories in general, but they haven't done that yet. So,
Ningen, what do you think? Should items be considered when evaluating units?
Man, maybe in a way. I don't know. It's hard to say because obviously items are there and you can use them, but we've obviously seen events like Cell Max where you can only bring a Sensu Bean. Red Zone, you can only bring one item. So it is worth considering, but it kind of just depends, I guess, what that interaction with the items is. Because, like, for example, if there's a unit who maybe they do lots of damage, but their defense is not particularly great, and so then when it comes to, say, if we're talking about like the hardest events, we'll ignore Cellmax because it is kind of a weird anomaly, but like the red zone toughest bosses, if a unit can only survive in that event if you have a defensive item constantly active, you can't do that in the red zone because you can only bring one and the most they last for is 2 turns. So it's probably worth considering to a certain extent, but I don't know. I guess it just depends like what item it is and how you'll use it. Because like if it, all I'm really, I guess, trying to say is if a unit is only good if you have items to use, then obviously there are certain events that they won't be good in. But that doesn't then necessarily make them bad. It's just another thing I guess you have to think about. So units being super good without having to use items is obviously great. But there are certain events where, yeah, you get loads of items and you can string certain combinations together to make certain units really good. So I think it's just all a big part of the puzzle, I guess.
Okay. Minato, what do you think about that one? Items should be considered when evaluating units. Do you agree or disagree?
It does depend on the event, like they said. Me personally, I feel like if a unit could, like, if we're talking about like how good a unit is going to be in terms of their valuation, if a unit can perform, on a similar level than a unit that, let's say like, I the wording is very weird. I think I did in there, but if a unit has really good performance, like on the same level of another unit, but then the second unit needs to have like an item up to do that, then obviously I feel like the first unit would be better because, maybe you're limited on items in certain events, like Red Zone, where you have only two. So Max, you only have like sensu beans, for example, right? And we don't know what kind of other restrictions like that they may have on future events. So it may be better in a sense to say, if a unit can be better without items, they're technically, in terms of like their pure passive and kit, the better built unit. But I don't really mind if you feel like, hey, I'm going to use items and just absolutely destroy this event with cooler, double Weesup, and it's like, sure, it really depends on your play style and how you prefer units to be.
I just think you can evaluate them both ways. Like with or without items, there's going to be two separate evaluations. Like, why not just do that?
That's fair.
Yep, for sure. All right. Well, the next one, this is 3 of 4. So Goresh, cell max should not be used to evaluate units.
Well, the reason why I kind of do like that argument is because I just actually despise the locking mechanic. And I feel like that mechanic specifically just ends a lot of runs in that event. I remember when I was first trying to beat that event, I kept getting locked like in the worst possible ways. So even if I had full HP, I was forced to use my senzu beans. I was like, all right, this is just dumb. Like I just that mechanic is so dumb because it takes all control away from you as the player, right?
Yep.
So if you're like, I always talk about this in like the Bojack event and stuff like that, where obviously the last phase can lock you. And if you didn't specifically bring a senzu bean or whatever the Korin's herb or whatever the hell that item is called that lets you unlock yourself, like let's just say you have a character that isn't designed to take a super attack in slot 1, like if they're a floating character where that needs to super first, and you get locked in, guess what? You can't do anything about it. Yeah. So I think that same mechanic being given to Cell Max, and then I guess they're kind of being quote unquote generous by giving you a senzu bean, by letting you unlock the character with the senzu bean effect. I guess you can make that argument, but I don't know. I also just think that Cell Max is an event that's designed to basically fodderize 97.5% or whatever the hell it is percent of the game.
Yeah.
So it's just like I guess I agree with that statement. If I was gonna say if I agree or disagree, and I had to pick one, I'd say I agree.
Okay. Ningen, what do you think about Cell Max?
I mean, I have my thoughts about the event, but in terms of the take itself, I 100% agree with it. Like, regardless of whether you like the event or not, I don't think it's a good way to value how good units are. It's fun to see how well they do in those events. Like, I like taking random units into that event for videos and stuff like that, but I don't think you could really say, like, if a unit is like dominating the red zone, is good in Super Battle Road, but then they get one shot by Cell Max's super attack, I don't think that's necessarily a detriment to that unit in general, since, as Goresh said, that's like 97% of the game or something can't survive his super attack. So it's a fun event to take units into. Obviously, the fact that you can dodge meant that we had some funny like builds and stuff when it first came out. People using like Pycon and using the Ghost Usher ability and stuff like that. It was quite fun. But yeah, it's not like they did already say as well, didn't they, in like one of the producer letter things or something like that, that they don't plan to make all like future difficult content on that level or harder. So then there's no real reason to rate units based by how well they do in that event. So it's a fun event to play, but yeah, I wouldn't consider a unit good or bad solely based on how good they are in the Cell Max event.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it, I think, too, is you can use it as a piece of the puzzle to show how good a unit is. Like, if a unit is able to go in there and, like, eat a super attack and, like, tear Cell Max in half with, like, their attack stats, then the unit is probably good based off of that.
Yeah, probably.
But I think there's other factors outside of the Cellmax event that you should consider when evaluating a character. Like this is just one of the 10 different things you could use. So
Yeah.
For sure. Minato, what do you think?
I mean, I was literally going to say that last thing where if you want to like use Somax as a part of like how good a unit could be, that's fine, but you shouldn't, in my opinion, solely based off Somax because there's different situations for every unit. There's like bosses of different typings, they do different things. Some characters could be stronger in a certain event than another. Like like PyCon will be could be like actually more useful with against Max than let's say maybe something like Broly where it can't dodge or
yeah,
other situations, right? Same thing with UI Goku. He actually be pretty good against Max, but against Broly he doesn't dodge, right? So it just depends, kind of, right? But if you like take a unit into Max and then he dies to a super attack, you can't be like, oh, the unit is terrible, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like most units in the game aren't designed to do that, right? Even like these brand new LRs, like even like cooler, sometimes Carnival Goku can't even eat those super attacks from him, right? So, and that situation is kind of weird. And if a unit would have like say an S tier, like has type advantage against like Meta Cooler Core, but then they don't really do as well against Cell Max, right? They're good in different situations. There's also like Super Battle Road, right? Some units may be designed for like that kind of content where they get debuff and stun. And it really comes down to, more so of how useful a unit could be rather than how good they could really be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, kind of my thought on it is just in general, I wouldn't even think about it as evaluating a student or a unit in an event. I would think about it as evaluating the kit, and then based on what does their defense stat get up to, what does their attack stat get to, how long does it take to get there, do they guard, what is their typing? Based on the unit's kit, then you could say, oh yeah, they're going to be good here, here, and here, but maybe not here. What you're doing is you're evaluating the kit and then figuring out where does that plug into the game? Where do you use that unit? That's kind of the way I look at it. And as
I
you guys
think
said,
I'm sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. I
No,
thought
no,
you
you're good.
finished.
No,
I was,
I'm done. Cut me
I
off,
was
please.
gonna I'm sorry.
No, 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 please cut me
um
off. I'm done. I need to be
oh,
done.
okay. Well, I guess I'm done.
Yeah.
I would say Uh, I would honestly say it may be better at this point because we have so many different types of events, different bosses do different things, to rate units based off of how good they do in that specific event, rather than maybe having it just as a general thing, because it's just so again like nothing else to say except these bosses do different things and units are good in certain situations.
Yeah.
So
yeah. That's if you guys watch my really old Dokkan showcase, well, not even super old, but like fairly old Dokkan showcases, I used to do an evaluation system at the end of each video, and I used to because this was back when it was like either Super Battle Road or like Legendary Goku event, and those were the two types of events we had. It was short versus long events. How I evaluated the characters. It was short versus long. It was offense and defense, and then I think it was like versatility was the last category. And then I would rate each unit out of 10 per category, and then they'd get a total score out of I think it was like 50 or 60 or something like that. I think it was 50. There's 5 categories in total, and then that's how I would compare the characters to each other. It would be like out of the 50 ranking. So I think that probably is still the best way to do it, but we have way more different categories in the game right now, so it's going to be a lot harder to do.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I personally like doing like this unit versus Broly and then some acts like different videos, just so I could see okay, maybe they'll be specifically good here, but then not so good here, and then you can kind of get a general idea of the unit if you want, if you're like someone into like tier lists and stuff like that. But I like personally like seeing the good in units rather than maybe one situation that look bad and you're like, oh, this entire unit sucks, right?
Right.
100%.
All right. Well, we got one more take to wrap up the show, and this is a pretty spicy one. So, Goresh, here you go. Apparently, defense is not as important as it is made out to be.
Well, I mean, I guess the first piece of the puzzle to unravel this one is to know like what does he mean by made out to be? I don't know what that means.
Let's just say in general, they're saying
general-
defense isn't as important as what people think, like as people play it out.
People in the community probably say like, I know a lot of people really, really, really like, like oh, if this unit can take a super attack, they're way better than a unit that could do billions of damage or something, right?
Yeah, it's
At least
the
that's what I'm understanding.
the
from it.
general consensus of the community is that defense is much more important than offense, and it comes largely from the hybrid Saiyan side of Twitter. But
My bad. Okay, gosh, just
Well,
attack me
basically,
directly.
what they're kind of saying is that they think defense is overhyped right now. So would you agree or disagree with that? Maybe.
I would disagree with it being overhyped. And I think the main reason is because both offense and defense have their place in the game. You kind of need both to be able to do anything, right?
Yep.
Every character can't be AGL Golden Frieza. Imagine if you had a full team of AGL Golden Friezas, like you would probably die of old age before you beat an event. And then on the other and then on the other hand, like every character can't be, I don't know, like what's a good example of like a complete glass cannon, like
Kaioken Goku,
Luke,
STR
Kaioken
Kaioken
Goku
Goku.
Yeah.
or like one of those characters that just like, or STR Vegito, right? Every character can't be STR transformed Vegito, otherwise you would die instantly. So you have to have a balance of both offense and defense, and I think that also comes in the effect of different characters, right? Obviously, like AGL Golden Frieza is designed for defense, and that's his role. Characters like STR Vegito are designed for offense, and that's his role. But I think having a balance is good, but I don't think the concept of defense is overrated. I think that's a dumb comment.
Yeah.
All right. Ningen.
Oh, sorry. I wanted to hop in if that's fine.
No, go ahead, Minato. You can steal, and then we'll do Ningen last.
Yeah,
Go
Negan
ahead.
gets
Oh, wow,
screwed.
on my
but-
birthday. Wow.
Yeah, birthday boy, get out of here. I just kidding. Hey, no, we're saving your comment for last because it's the best. It's your
Let's
present.
see.
That's right.
Okay, but I would say, I think that I would say they're more like equal than one's better than the other. You can have a specific like preference where oh, I like offensive units better. That's just how I like playing the game. Maybe
Yep.
someone's like, oh, I like maybe consistency, one and done with like defense. I just tank everything and just get through it. It really depends on how you feel on your personal favorite units. It could even be based off the character you like. You're a big Cooler fan, so you end up being mega offensively player style. I said that super weird. I'm bad at this, but you get the point, right? Or like maybe you're a Gohan stan. A lot of Gohan units are really defensive, right? Guard stacking, stuff like that. And it also like depends, like Goresh did, the role. You have a unit like Golden Frieza doing the defense, but then you have LR Final Form Cooler in slot 2 doing the offense, and then that really, is how team building does work in that essence. Some units have to do certain things. And that's all I have to say about it.
Okay, Ningen, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much everything that's been said. I like Minato said I could go last as my present, and then basically covered everything else that I was going to say. But
Sorry.
but yeah, it is literally, it just comes from the take itself. Just comes from this argument, like Minato said, it's between the two different play styles, and we talked about that earlier a little bit. That a lot, it just comes down to your preference of play style. Because yeah, if you don't mind a bit of inconsistency, like if you get bad RNG, then you might die. But if you're using a very heavy offense-based team, you can often destroy events, especially very quickly. And then if you're using very defense-orientated teams, it takes you a lot longer, but you're a little bit on the safer side. But yeah, I do consider, like, I personally am more of a fan of the offensive play style, but I still do like really good tanks. I always like to have a good tank on my teams. And the defensive playstyle works. I think they both have advantages and disadvantages, because obviously not every single unit, if you're going for like a full defensive team, not every single unit is going to be as good as like Golden Frieza. So the longer it takes you to beat an event, the more chances you have of that one unit that can't really take a super being the one that has to eat a super. So they both have their advantages and disadvantages, but you just have to kind of consider both when it comes to team building. So I think it's one of those things where there aren't really any wrong answers, because you can see screenshots of events being beaten, like I say, with a full offensive team, and it might have taken like 10 tries, but then they nuke the whole thing in like 5 minutes, and then you'll see screenshots of people doing like full turtle build teams and they still beat the event, but it takes like 25 minutes. So they both have their advantages and disadvantages. I would put them at a roughly equal in terms of importance, right? You have to have both. So there you go.
And we can go back to what we said with the original question, where it's like, it depends even on the event you're in.
Yep.
Right? Maybe that unit that can't take a super attack, you have type advantage with that unit in the final phase. So you're more safe with that option, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, for sure. So I pretty much agree with what everybody said, but I would say that defense is not overhyped. It's extremely important in the game. It's an important stat to have. So yeah, I would say I overall disagree with the statement, kind of like Goresh
Yeah.
does, right?
Well, that's the
All
thing
right.
as well. You got to remember, if we have events now where like STR Broly can AoE you in slot 1 or Cell can super you in slot 1 for like 1.7 million damage, it is kind
Yeah.
of stupid to say that defense isn't important when we have
Right.
events that can do that. So
Right. All right.
Yeah,
Does any?
Oh, so sorry. I was gonna add one extra thing too.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like I think one misconception about just defense, because the comment you're reading literally just says defense, right?
Yes, it just says defense.
I would consider different utility too as defense, like dodge and like
Dodge.
Pycon's active skill and
Damage
like all these different
reduction, yep.
all these different
Metal cooler
facets of the
ceiling.
healing,
Yeah.
like all these different utility and aspects of the game that a lot of these newer characters are doing, are I would classify all of those things as defense, like under the umbrella of defense. So
Yep, for sure. I would agree with that.
Mm.
Anybody else want to chime in before we wrap up for today?
I mean, even like ceiling stunning, like attack lowering back in the day, all like basically defensive kind of base things, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. We still have Super Battle Road. So for Super
Yeah.
Battle Road, you would say sealing and stunning are defensive abilities as opposed to offensive. So, yeah.
Yep. For sure. All right. Well, that is going to do it for our show today. This has been episode 100 of the Dokkan Battle Podcast. I would like to thank our guests today, Minato, Goresh, the Masked Ningen. Thanks to Vilify for producing behind the scenes. My name is Joe Wags. It has been an honor hosting for you all today. Very privileged to be a part of this epic episode 100. Thanks to everyone for listening. We'll catch you all on the next one. See ya.